and gentlemen, I want to paint a picture for you. Imagine 1908. Imagine Fort Myer, Virginia, on September 17th, 1908. Same date as the battle and anniversary of Antietam, just about 40 or 50 miles to the north. So there's two men who are going to climb aboard a Wright flyer. Now this is an aircraft that has no wheels, has about a 30 horsepower engine, and piloting this aircraft in civilian clothes is Orville Wright, one of the brothers who 5 years earlier flew the first aircraft powered flight heavier than aircraft down in North Carolina. With him is a young soldier in military uniform. They took off Fort Myer. We have accounts, there's about 400 or 500 people watching this. And so the idea is some investigation by the Army to see if there's a utility and aspect to aviation. 2 or 3 traffic patterns later, as they were coming close to land, about 100 feet above ground level, something happened. The aircraft snapped, wings started breaking, struts were coming apart, wires going everywhere. It pitched upward and nosed over into a descent of about 75 feet and crashed. Orville Wright survived the accident, badly injured. But his passenger, Thomas Selfridge, West Point graduate, 1903, with a guy named General Douglas MacArthur, did not survive the accident. He's buried in our cemetery here at West Point. That's the beginning of a long and amazing marriage, let me use the term marriage, of aviation and this military academy. Here we are in Arnold Auditorium, the only 5-star general in the Air Force, general of the Air Force. Am I correct, gentlemen?
Correct.
Arnold Auditorium. And we picked this location because we have the numbered Air Forces here up on the wall. Now, some of you cadets and graduates probably held all kinds of meetings here and coming to events and watching shows and wondering, well, what's all this blue stuff up here? But the 13th Air Force is what General Davis commanded eventually. So I just want to recite a few things real quick about our amazing aviation heritage here at the U.S. Military Academy. So first of all, the Navy was competing with us for aviation, and they were doing their thing, and we're proud of that. But in 1907, the Aeronautical Division of the Signal Corps was established. It lasted just 7 years. Then it became the Aviation Section, and then the Air Service, the Army Air Service, from 1918 to 1926. And in 1926, it became the Army Air Corps, just like we have the Military Police Corps, the Corps of Engineers. It was a branch of the service. It grew very strongly to the 20s and 30s with new aircraft and new tactics. And then anticipating America's involvement in World War II, the Army reorganizes aviation assets into the U.S. Army Air Forces. In June of that year, the Army divided itself into 3 main components. Army Ground Forces, later became FORSCOM, and then the Army Surface Forces, Service and Supply, which is all the supply and logistics aspect, and then the Army Air Forces, plural. And just like we have numbered armies, the 3rd Army, the 8th Army, the 1st Army, we have numbered Air Forces. And Air Force bases. Now, I didn't do a thorough study of this, but I have right now, there's probably more because some have probably been inactivated, 9 Air Force bases named after graduates. And I'm just going to read off a few of them. Mason Patrick, class 1886. Who else graduated that year? A guy named John J. Pershing, commanded the AEF in World War I. And we are now in the centennial of World War I. Patrick Air Force Base, Florida, right? It's in Florida. Selfridge Air Force Base, Air National Guard Base up in Michigan. As an Army aviator, I landed my C-12 there one time in the freezing winter time, and it's the only time in my time flying fixed wing that we actually taxied right into the hangar, and then they closed the doors as we shut down the engine. I like how the Air Force does things. The Army, we would have gotten out in the cold and shut it down, and then get the tug and pulled it into the hangar. That's the way the Army does things. Andrews Air Force Base, one of the most famous Air Force bases in the Air Force. Frank Andrews, class, 1906. In 07, we have Hap Arnold Air Force Base in Tennessee. And then Augustine Robbins, 1907 graduate, Robbins Air Force Base, Georgia. Frederick Castle, class, 1930, Medal of Honor recipient, Castle Air Force Base. And then Richard Ellsworth Air Force Base, 1935 graduate in South Dakota. I've been there too, it's pretty cold up there. Then Robert Vance, class, 1939, Vance Air Force Base, Oklahoma. Another Medal of Honor recipient. We have 4 graduate Medal of Honor recipients received their award in operational flight and on air missions. The other 2 were Colonel Leon Johnson, class 1926. He was in the famous Ploesti raid, destroying the Romanian oil fields that Germany had during the war on August 1st, 1943. A famous raid. And then also Colonel William Jones, class 1945. He missed World War II, served in Vietnam, did some great service, was nominated for the Medal of Honor, left country, went to Germany, and sadly, tragically, he was killed in an accident in 1969 before he was awarded the Medal of Honor. In Cullom Hall, we have the memorial room. 1,558 names of West Point graduates who died during time of the war. Combatants in uniform in theater of operations. 1,558 names. Of that, 611 served in World War II. 611. Of that, 124 died on air missions. 124 died flying in air missions during World War II. During World War II, and a lot of us know about it, the old sub post up at Stewart Field. Now it's a joint use commercial airfield. And I think someone just flew in there yesterday, right? Dr. Holman? About 30 to 40% of the Corps of Cadets were up at Stewart Field the last year or parts of their last 2 years during school. Classrooms in the morning, sometimes here, but then they'd bus them up, or they took classes up there, flight line in the afternoon. About 30% during the war years, 42 up through 46. 2 of those individuals were African Americans, and they later joined the 477 bomb group, so they are considered Tuskegee Airmen because they were with Tuskegee units, even though they didn't do their flight training at Tuskegee. Of those cadets, 14 died in training accidents. So, those of us who know West Point, you drive up the steep hill, the chapel on the left, the 1910 chapel, you make the hard turn, Lusk Reservoir, you go past the Soldiers Monument, there's 2 monuments back in a kind of a rock-on cult. You see one, a mid-waist pedestal with a sundial on it, and it has the Army Aviation Branch wings, which we still use in the Army Aviation Branch. And then there's the other statue to the back is a naked guy, and that represents our aviators in wartime and also the 14 in peacetime, well, at Stewart Field. Until 1955, 25% of the commissions from this academy and also the Naval Academy went into the Air Force because there was no Air Force Academy until the fall of 1955. What's interesting, some of us are here to remember this,